3, 2, 1.
Got a blast!
So around Halloween 2020, I had the sudden inkling to watch the Halloween episode of Jimmy Neutron. It was certainly odd, and it got me thinking about doing a retrospective video on the series. But then I have lots of ideas for videos, and it immediately went into the ever-increasing will-do pile. And then, in the year and a half since then, something odd has happened. Retrospectives of Nick shows have become an increasingly popular topic. I mean, I suppose they always were. It's not like this was ever going to be an original idea, but things being what they are, now it's part of a trend. Plus, it's the 20th anniversary of the show. I mean, the actual anniversary was in July, but that was just the pilot episode. Season 1 wasn't released until September.
And let me tell you, kids, nothing prepares you for your favorite childhood show turning 20. So, hop on my content train, friends. It's time for a Nickelodeon Retro ville spective.
I loved Jimmy Neutron as a kid. I was obsessed with it. I had a Jimmy Neutron themed birthday party, I dressed as him for Halloween, I even had a life-size Jimmy Neutron plush. Wonder what happened to that. I remember going to see the movie in theaters, and I'll be honest, I don't actually remember loving the movie or anything, but it was one of the few movies I had seen, and I was obsessed with movies. So I would talk about Jimmy Neutron non-stop.
I know, imagine me loving movies and talking about them all the time.
But when the show dropped about a year later, I was hooked. The pilot episode, When Pants Attacked, wasn't the best episode of the show, but it's one that I think perfectly demonstrates what the show is about, and gives you a clear view of their sense of humor. All it took was watching one episode for me to immediately acknowledge how much this show has affected how I make jokes. It's extremely funny.
I see London! I see France!
You got really good eyesight.
But before we dive into the actual episode, here's a side tangent. My dad works for CBS, which is owned by Viacom, so he got Paramount Plus for free. I would not pay for this service, and you shouldn't either. But I have been using it to write this video, as the entire show is on the platform, except the pilot. How the fuck are you gonna have every episode except the first episode? My guess as to why this has happened is that the first episode uses music from the movie that wouldn't be in the rest of the series. Which, if that is the reason, that's kind of upsetting because the music from the movie kinda sucked. Apparently you're supposed to think music was better when you were a kid, but no, music sucked when I was a kid. A never-ending litany of boy bands, pop punk, nu metal, and incomprehensible bling rap. And I know I'm gonna get people going, oh, but what about Limp Bizkit or Blink-182? To which I say, this is Jimmy Neutron. They can't afford any of the good acts. Instead, the song they use in both the movie and the first episode of the show is by fucking Aaron Carter, the guy who sang what was, at the time of the show's release, my absolute least favorite song. Also, if that is the reason episode 1 isn't on Paramount Plus, just pay him. You guys are $1 billion media conglomerate. I'm sure Aaron Carter could use the money. Also, somewhat infuriatingly, the movie is on HBO Max. With that out of the way, let's dive into When Pants Attack. The setup is simple. Jimmy is in trouble for not putting away his pants, so he invents a nanochip to make them put themselves away. Unfortunately, it goes haywire, and his pants come to life and begin infecting other pants. So it's episode 1, and Jimmy's already created hostile artificial intelligence. If the title When Pants Attack, or hell, even the name Jimmy Neutron don't immediately tip you off, this show takes heavy inspiration from the sci-fi films of the 50s and 60s. I mean, his town is called Retroville. That said, unlike, say, Joe Dante movies, which would wear its influences way out on its sleeves, this show is a lot subtler about it, and rightfully so. It was a show for children in the 2000s, none of whom would have gotten what they were referencing. Instead, they lift elements of the aesthetics of the era, and not really much else. It's 50s B movies for a new generation. I think that even brings a charm to the CG. I would not argue with anyone who says the CG was rough or primitive. But, you know, so are some of the effects in those old sci-fi flicks. The cutting-edge technology fit well with the sci-fi vibe. Like Tron and Reboot before it, you accept that it's primitive because it's new technology. And I think this looks a lot better than those. I just think it's a step in the lineage, even if Pixar had proven you could go CG without sci-fi elements. This episode also reminded me of something else that I bet drew me in as a child. Jimmy's really lazy. Like, the whole show is about a kid using his superhuman knowledge of science to avoid simple household chores. I will be bringing this up several times. But for now, I will say I really related to the plight of a kid who was smart but used his intelligence to get out of doing stuff. Like, most content about smart kids had them enjoying school and learning math and science and stuff, but Jimmy will invent things to get him out of school, which I related to a lot more. So yeah, this was a strong start to the series. Like I said, it's not the best episode, but a first episode shouldn't be. This sets the tone perfectly. It's exactly what a pilot should be. If you like it, there's more to come. If you don't, this is all the show is, so you'd be better off leaving. And if the pilot brought back positive nostalgic feelings, then episode 2 brought back exactly the opposite. Now make no mistakes, it's a good episode, maybe too good. I thought it was the funniest shit when I was 10 years old. Jimmy decides he doesn't like being a genius, so he creates a machine to make himself dumber. It's an obvious plot, so I'm glad they're getting it out of the way in episode 2. Of course, it goes wrong, and he ends up incredibly stupid.
Hey, have you guys seen my loopy dance? I'm loopy.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the joke I decided to quote non-stop, no matter how annoying it was. Didn't I just say I related to being a smart kid? That might have been an overstatement. But I did appreciate this, too.
So, are you a big genius show-off butt brain again?
I'm not sure. Of course, what is genius but an artificial construct in the guise of an empirical truth?
Of course, there's a meteor headed towards Retroville, and they need Jimmy to be smart again. The mayor even shows up? Did you know they had a mayor? I'm pretty sure this is his only appearance. And man, they go a little dark for a Nickelodeon show.
All right, children. Now everyone stand in an orderly fashion as we await our imminent doom.
It's also the first episode where we get a glimpse of the inevitable Jimmy x Cindy plotline.
How does this thing work?
I don't know, Susie.
It's Cindy!
You're kinda cute.
That said, I'm a little concerned they don't really resolve the I'm unhappy with being a genius plotline. It just gets erased by this, well, you have to be. Even though the problem you needed him to solve was one he caused.
Okay,
Okay, I think we should stop now.
I want to talk about how Hugh Neutron is a really good dad. He supports Jimmy's experiments, even when some of them turn out messy. The joke is not that he's a bad dad, like say on Jimmy's sister show, Fairly Odd Parents, but rather that he's a dumb dad who's a far better parent than he realizes. It's certainly a unique take on fatherhood. I would even say it's reminiscent of what made Goofy work in a Goofy movie. He's dumb, but he's a good father. But of course, a Goofy movie was way different. It's about a kinda cool, but mostly really dorky kid who's best friends with a comedically fat character voiced by Rob Paulsen and a sort of spaced out weirdo with spiky hair. And hey, wait a minute!
Ladies and gentlemen, and Cindy.
What? Jimmy Neutron says non-binary rights?
And may the best salesperson win.
Yeah, sure. Jimmy Neutron says non-binary rights. Why not?
In this episode, they have to sell candy. No, this is not the one with the super extra good candy. This is the one with the robot salesman. No, I don't remember this one either. I remember the book gum from the beginning of the episode, so I guess I've seen this one before, but if you had to ask me to start naming plots before going in, I wouldn't have mentioned this one. Cindy uses intimidation to win the contest.
That's a very beautiful horse. It would be unfortunate for him to have an accident. Capiche?
And Jimmy's robot tries to sell him into slavery.
I always wanted to buy her since I was 5 years old.
What an episode. At this point, you may be asking why the military allows Jimmy, a 10-year-old boy, to have a functional rocket. I assume it's kind of a Rick and Morty or even Metalocalypse type thing, where they keep their eye on him, but at a distance, which the next episode basically confirms.
Mom, Dad, I have an announcement.
Oh, tell me now if this involves any principals, policemen, or government people.
Nope, not this time.
You don't get where Jimmy's at without attracting some attention. Jimmy wants a little brother, but his dad's already snipped, so he has to build one for himself. I really remember this being later in the series. I'm starting to think I saw the pilot and then only caught season 1 in reruns for a while. Or maybe I saw them so much in reruns that they got fixed in my memory deep into the series. Anyway, Brobot commits the cardinal sin, being more likable than Jimmy. So Jimmy pulls a normal stunt, but when that doesn't work, he decides he's had enough and is deactivating him, when Brobot goes HAL 9000 on him.
But then we can't play anymore. And you're my big brother.
In the end, Jimmy sends him to the moon with a robot mom and dad. So remember, kids, if your younger sibling is annoying, just send them to the moon with new parents. And they do have kind of a nice ending where Jimmy learns to play with Goddard when he's alone. So do you guys remember the episode where he brings Thomas Edison back to life? Yeah, so the setup to that happening is Cindy giving a report on Marconi inventing the radio, which Jimmy says isn't true, which arguably it isn't. Tesla technically beat him to it, except here Jimmy's gonna argue Marconi couldn't have done it without Edison inventing electricity first. So even in Nick cartoons, Edison steals Tesla's spotlight. They do nail his reaction to showing up in the present, though.
Where I come from, that's copyright infringement! Copyright infringement!
Also, Jimmy just, leaves in the middle of class to bring a man from the past to the present. He's already got a time machine at the ready. There's even an implication he's used it before to disastrous results.
Hey, Cindy! I just came back from the Lost and Found. Oh, really? Did you happen to see Jimmy's point?
God damn, this man invented time travel and they're dunking on him for it. Oh man, you brought Thomas Edison back from the dead? Big whoop. And what are they learning in Miss Fowle's math class? Speaking of Miss Fowl, she and Edison start dating. Good for them. Unfortunately, this show acts like without Thomas Edison, most electric things wouldn't exist, which is not true. He was not the only one inventing things then. In fact, without him, electronics would probably be more accessible. And apparently Goddard won't disappear if he's solar-powered? I am not even going to try to understand that. Meanwhile, Tom is totally content to let it all die for some good pussy, so it's up to Jimmy to break them up.
Will you hear this poem I wrote ya? Roses are red, violets are blue. Miss Fowle's armpits stink like an old skunky. What? Wait a minute. I didn't say that.
Can they not see the robot dog sticking out of the bush? Or tell that Edison's lips aren't moving? I do like the resolution to this plotline, though.
Oh, Tom, today was wonderful, but I'm not the marrying kind. I'm a free spirit, a butterfly in the breeze.
Well, knock 100 points off my IQ and call me Tesla.
Let's move on.
Episode 4 starts dark, but I don't know how much I can show without getting copyright strike. Basically, Jimmy erased his parents' memory of their second honeymoon an entire year of their marriage? What is Jimmy hiding? Is this how he got the rockets? Grandma Neutron is staying to watch Jimmy while they're away. I like her. She's unhinged.
Told you I could get here from the airport in under 50 cents.
If I made her young again, I bet she'd stop complaining.
Can you guess where this goes? She's a baby who can talk. And the townspeople act like Jimmy isn't doing crazy shit like this all the time. I'm nitpicking. This episode's hilarious. Jimmy is literally me.
I love and respect Mom far too much to let her know I disobeyed her.
Also, Cindy says this.
Looks like Libby and I have a date with some enchilada burritos.
Do I ship Cindy and Libby? Can't think of a reason not to.
In the next episode, Jimmy sees a commercial for the Encyclopedia of Infinite Knowledge. Don't do it, Jimmy. You're only like 5 years from Wikipedia. It's not worth it.
Seriously, my parents bought me an encyclopedia set when I was like 5, and by the time I was old enough to use it, everything was online.
This episode is actually the first mention of McSpanky's, a restaurant that appears in one of the show's more infamous episodes, as Hugh had the opportunity to invest in it, which would have made him a very wealthy man. Jimmy goes back in time 15 years, and it's the 70s?
15 years ago now, this episode was already 5 years old.
But also 15 years before this episode was 1987, so either Jimmy Neutron is set in the late 80s, early 90s, or Hugh and Judy hit their disco phase a decade too late. But I kind of believe that. It's 1987, and Hugh just discovered the Bee Gees. And Jimmy approaches them for some reason thinking they'd recognize him as their son?
Of course they don't know me. We don't exist yet.
Jimmy, for a boy genius, you're kinda stupid. Carl quotes Day the Earth Stood Still for no discernible reason.
Clatu barada nicto.
But as a kid, I didn't know what that meant, so I let it slide. I also let this slide.
Are you one of Hubie Doobie's neighbors?
Holy shit, Jimmy's parents smoked weed. Also, Jimmy's parents have been living in the same house for 15 years, and even in the alternate timeline where they're rich, they live in the same house. Home ownership was wild in the 80s. Of course, his parents are snotty assholes when they're rich, and Jimmy realizes the encyclopedias aren't worth it. I know it sounds like I'm glossing over the point of the episode, but the episode kinda glosses over it. He's rich for barely 2 minutes. I feel like this maybe needed more development. Then again, it's not the most original plot line, and I guess they kinda knew it. So yeah, credit for showing us Jimmy's parents when they were young, but ultimately a lesser episode in my opinion. Hey, did you guys know Jimmy went to school with Butch the Bully?
Butch just gave me a wedgie.
Jimmy and Cindy end up being lab partners, and Jimmy devises a very risky, adventurous project that Cindy immediately agrees to. I really don't know why he thought she wouldn't want to do that. Let's make something clear. Cindy is also unrealistically smart. She's just less unrealistically smart than Jimmy.
Excuse me, but the mandible crest of Cindy's alleged plesiosaur is actually that of a male megalosaur as defined by last week's World Congress of Paleontologists.
Those findings were inconclusive, and you know it, Neutron.
She's also smarter than Jimmy in a lot of practical ways.
Yeah, here we go. Time to complicate a perfectly good plan with one of your goofy, unnecessary inventions.
Like, way to summarize the entire show for us, Cindy.
So, I don't really know where this is going or why I'm bringing this up, but when I was a kid, I had a crush on Cindy Vortex. Keep in mind, I'm talking like age 7, age 8. Which is weird, because I didn't hate Jimmy. There were a lot of characters I supported because of the people they opposed, but Cindy wasn't one of them. I loved Jimmy. I saw myself in Jimmy. I wanted to be him. But I never got their rivalry. To me, it seemed like if Jimmy was really all that smart, he'd see that he and Cindy worked much better together. Maybe that was the point.
And at some point, after Jimmy's gotten them hopelessly lost, Cindy pulls a "look at me, I'm the captain now" on him. But she also knows when she needs Jimmy to fix the problems he's created. Of course, the buried treasure they were after is actually delicious saltwater taffy. Jimmy seems really upset, even though he got an A+. I thought this was just something you devised to scare Cindy away. I didn't know you were all that interested in the treasure.
Now, Viacom owns Jimmy Neutron, and they are notoriously picky with their YouTube copyright strikes. And while I think they're a tad overzealous, I have to admit, there's a part of me that wants to show you the entire 1.5-minute opening of I Dream of Jimmy. Now, I could not get away with that. That would get copyright struck for sure, even from a less trigger-happy company. So, you're just gonna have to play along at home with this one.
Carl is having bad dreams about something chasing him, and Jimmy's like, "Man, that sucks. Wish there was something I could do." "Oh, wait, I already built a machine to go into your dreams." How did you forget that? Jimmy Neutron did Inception before Inception, and he just neglects to even mention it until now? And I mean, this is Inception down to the main conflict of the episode being that he could die in the dream. He also gets upset at Carl for needing a glass of warm milk, even though Goddard produces it in like 2 seconds. There is a bit of continuity from the movie in this episode.
She would rub my tummy and she'd sing,
anything else?
Nani, nani, nani.
This episode feels darker than I think they intended it to, but then again, maybe they intended it to. In the dream, Carl's a genius who hurts Jimmy with his experiments. It feels like Carl has a lot of pent-up resentment for Jimmy. He even has Jimmy's parents in the dream. Meanwhile, Boy Genius takes half the episode to realize, hey, I'm in a dream, I have to use dream logic. Jimmy finds the source of his nightmares is a killer lima bean. So that's 2 cartoons I was obsessed with as a kid that have explored the subtle terror of large beans. Of course, Jimmy Neutron did it first, and frankly, more effectively. And of course, the thing that's gonna snap Carl awake is Jimmy kissing Cindy. And in an ending as appropriate as it is bizarre, the bean chases them out of the dream, there's a cutaway, and then they're eating the bean. No explanation.
This is my favorite episode so far.
Jimmy makes winter in summer. Lame. I can tolerate winter for what little we get of it, but deep down, summer is superior. Then it becomes a second ice age. Jimmy could probably stop climate change, and he hasn't. Oh, and the solution involves sweating, which is kind of weird. That's all I have to say about this episode. Let's move on. In this episode, there's a talent show, and Jimmy decides to say he, Carl, and Sheen have a band. Weirdly, he gets the idea from an NSYNC parody, but then he builds them all instruments which NSYNC didn't play. And if NSYNC, or Out of Sync, are that popular, that means it probably is the early 2000s.
Oh, hey, what about this? The Science Kings?
Now, I don't know if Jimmy would like mathcore, but I do know that Jimmy would give me a very detailed explanation of what mathcore is, without ever letting on what his feelings were. It's like, yeah, that's cool, man. I'm here because the music slaps.
The robot instruments make them great, and they immediately get huge egos.
I'm thinking about changing our name. What about the Jimmy Neutron Experience?
The Jimmy Neutron Experience actually is a good name for a band. This episode is also noteworthy as it's the first to have any prominent featuring of Mr. Nick Dean.
Nick was the cool kid from the movie. He's sort of a combination of James Dean and the Fonz, except Hispanic for some reason. Also weird that the cool kid had the same name as the network this was on. You think that was on purpose? Because I never noticed as a kid.
He's shown up in episodes, but here he gets his first line since the movie. I like this character. Sheen demands to be called the artist formerly known as Sheen.
From now on, you will refer to me as the artist formerly known as Sheen.
And as a child, I thought this was so funny, I wanted to be called the artist formerly known as Matt. That's right, not formerly, formally. I misheard him and thought he just wanted to be addressed in a formal way. I had no idea who was.
I want a behind-the-scenes documentary tracing my amazing ride to fame while revealing several humiliating skeletons in my closet.
What skeletons does Sheen have? Here, I am going to compliment the work of voice actress Andrea Martin, the voice of Jimmy's teacher, Miss Fowl. The joke with Miss Fowl is that she looks and talks like a bird, which is a gimmick that could become very annoying very quickly with another actor, but Martin absolutely nails it. I'm not sure how many bras were scripted, but she always leads into them in a way that feels completely natural. This character really only works with her.
Instead, here is Jimmy, Sheen, and Carl doing something else.
This episode ends disgusting too. I did not remember Jimmy Neutron having this much gross-out humor. Granted, in this case, the joke is that everyone thought it was gross. Next episode, Jimmy is bad at athletics, and for some reason his school is giving out last place ribbons 2 days in a row. I'm leaving out some very funny jokes, I don't want to ruin it for anyone. Also, I really have nothing to say about them except they're funny. This is the first episode to mention Purple Flurp, also from the movie. I appreciate that they referenced stuff from the movie, but didn't feel the need to force it in right at the beginning. It's inserted naturally, it's not just, hey, remember the movie? You know, like I'm doing.
Oh, look! A 1957 Van de Graaff electrostatic generator!
What? What?
Jimmy, you are the very face of high intelligence, low wisdom. Cindy T-poses into the men's restroom to assert dominance. Good for her. This is the first episode where Jimmy feels kinda evil. He steals Miss Foul's sandwich and just bullies some random kids for no reason. It's not just showing up Cindy in this episode. He's really a dick.
Who wrote this episode? I'm gonna pretend I didn't see that.
Luckily, he gets what's coming to him. And look at this animation. You're telling me this was done in 2002 on a TV budget? Jimmy makes a device that can translate thought into music, and Cindy has a boombox in her desk specifically to prank him on this? That's some commitment to the bit. Of course, he then tweaks it to read Cindy's mind on the phone, and, naturally, a stray lightning bolt means they swap brains. Yep, it's the gender swap episode, everyone.
They wonder why our whole generation grew up to be trans, but every cartoon had this episode when we were kids.
They spend several days fighting, racking up extra detention and starting lame jobs. But if you don't find a way out of their body, you're the one who has to work and go to detention. Alright, I'll give you guys one joke.
Are you sure about this, Cindy?
Yes, Cindy's mother.
That's the joke that has made me laugh the hardest so far. The only solution to their situation? Dumping their brains into a pot and letting Carl Sheen and Libby sort it out. No offense, Jim, but I trust Libby more than your guys.
Did you, notice when our brains were floating inside that thing together, one of us was imagining us walking down a country lane holding hands and, kissing?
Wait, they have memory of being in the brain vat? They've already read all of each other's thoughts? Would these guys have to sort out the memories of their time in the vat?
Or, is it actually brilliant? They don't remember being in the vat together. They were just both imagining that.
This next episode I remember watching repeatedly as a kid to understand Sheen's extremely long joke at the end. Jimmy sets out to prove the Phantom of Retroland doesn't exist, so he sneaks out to the park after midnight. Am I alone in thinking being in an amusement park at night with no one else around would be really cool? Of course, they meet the Phantom, and I think Jimmy's explanation of what he's doing is bullshit, but the end of it is they hit the Phantom with one of those swinging boat rides, except it's shaped like a pendulum? Holy shit, Retroland is the most metal theme park ever. It's Nick. Honestly, this is the first Nick-heavy episode. He had a pretty big role in the movie, but they use him sparingly in the show. He gets a spot on the poster and Libby doesn't, but I would consider Libby to be part of the main cast, where Nick's just a side character. Then again, I like that they don't feel the need to shove him into every episode. He's here when we need him. Also, I think the message of this episode is that Jimmy's dedication to empirical facts and science is ruining the fun for everyone else, which isn't a message you see in a lot of kids' content. In the second part of this episode, Jimmy becomes a hamster because of a teleporter, a la The Fly. Jimmy has, for reasons I do not understand, programmed Goddard to hate rodents like a normal dog would. Jimmy Hamster and Hamster Jimmy certainly stick out in my mind as things I remember from my childhood, but this episode feels like it's over as soon as it starts. I really have nothing to add. Let's move on. No reason to go deep on every episode.
I've been calling him Furry Jimmy.
In this episode, Jimmy becomes a hall monitor and lets the power go to his head. Never seen a Nickelodeon show do that before.
It's Jimmy. Jimmy's the hall monitor.
That said, unlike the SpongeBob episode, which is mostly a joke on SpongeBob as a character, this seems like a more direct indictment of law enforcement.
A colorfully wrapped sucrose-based chewing substance. Gum, perhaps?
But I wasn't chewing it.
That's possession, Sheen. You are going down.
Then Jimmy hypnotizes his parents into thinking every day is his birthday. This invention has moral implications this show is not prepared to discuss. Ben Stein makes a cameo as a clown. It's nice that this episode is about how too much of a good thing is a bad thing. I like this one. I'm sorry, I just realized I'm only 9 episodes in. I gotta pick up the pace just a little. But next is the well-remembered candy episode. Lots of nostalgia bait posters love to post stuff like, "You all wanted to eat this candy."
But I would never nostalgia bait you guys.
Honestly, I never did want to eat the candy. I always thought it was impossibly good, something only a cartoon could eat. It would never taste as good as it was supposed to in real life. This episode starts with Jimmy doing torturous experiments on Carl.
Ugh. You guys want to know what Sheen's fetish is?
My turn! My turn! I want to touch the shocky door again!
Okay, no, you probably didn't want to know that, so let's talk about the childhood obsession with eating the sourest candy.
What was that, man? I enjoy a good sour candy, but the impulse as a kid was to go way overboard.
The candy's so perfect, it seems to have created a physiological need in people. Let the exploitation begin.
Jimmy seems like the type of guy who'd get up to some Walter White shit, you know what I mean?
Heisenberg!
But when the masses get too demanding, Jimmy has to use shock therapy to return everyone to normal? I don't know about that one, Jim. Then Jimmy turns Miss Fowl into the Jolly Green Giant. That's fun. And I simply can't neglect to mention the B-plot where Jimmy's dad goes to a toaster convention because Jimmy keeps converting all his toasters into inventions. Cindy once again invades the men's restroom to berate Carl and Sheen.
Goddard! Town-saving music!
Jimmy, you don't get to play heroic town-saving music when it's your fault the town is under siege. Next episode, Jimmy is dealing with a bully who is not the usual bully, Butch, but an entirely new bully, Terry. Although, honestly, what's Butch's deal? The only thing he's done all season is wedgie Carl. Jimmy bullies more kids than that. It's like they were told to insert a generic bully character and then never did anything with him. And honestly, in the grand scheme of things Jimmy has dealt with, this one bully character who's in this episode and only this episode seems like no big deal. Last episode, Miss Fowl was a kaiju and I wrote 4 sentences about it. Cindy is a more consistent bully than this. No, of course, he's not the antagonist. This is the episode that introduces the nanobots, recurring villains on the show. The nanobots thing is that they attack everyone who isn't Jimmy, so Jimmy has to create Isaac Asimov's worst nightmare. I don't know why Jimmy couldn't just program Goddard to fight off bullies, but you know, I like the nanobots. They're really funny, so I'm glad they come back in later episodes. They're also sort of a meta gag, as they're voiced by Darren Norris and Tom Kenny, Cosmo and SpongeBob, the leads in Nick's other 2 biggest cartoons. Also, this episode goes to absurd lengths to do a sitcom misunderstanding to the point it's clear that's the joke. And this ending.
You see, Goddard, boys are one way and girls, well, they're another way entirely. Then there's ducks.
Next is a very personal episode to me. It's called Crime Sheen Investigation. Alright kids, pay attention. This is a video now. It was a way to watch episodes of TV shows and even some movies portably at like 140p with horrible sound and in black and white. I begged my parents for one of these for Christmas. And a year later, in 2003, they released the much better Video Now color, and I felt like I had missed out and gotten the worst version. But by like 2006, we had pretty good portable DVD players, so both of them were obsolete. Point being, I had 2 episodes on the Video Now exclusive platform. This episode and Band Geeks from SpongeBob. I had these episodes memorized. Which is too bad because this is one of the weaker episodes so far. Jimmy is a pervert, though.
Goddard, X-ray the suspect's clothes.
For what purpose, Jimmy? Do you think she has Sheen's missing Ultralord under her shirt? Honestly, the funniest joke is that Sheen's figure was stolen by squirrels, and even that seems pretty obvious. I mean, I have heard every joke this episode has done 100 times over. Maybe that's affecting my enjoyment. Then again, I still think Band Geeks is hilarious. I just think this one's forgettable. Like, I made a big deal about having it memorized, and I barely remembered any of it. Then we get Journey to the Center of Carl, and is it me or did we also get a lot of these going inside people episodes in cartoons? Like, it made sense for Magic School Bus to do. It was an educational program that was teaching kids about the human body. Jimmy Neutron, I'd say, is educational adjacent. They weren't required to teach you anything, but it was about science, so you might accidentally learn something. So it makes sense for them to do too. But it happened in Ah Real Monsters, Captain Planet, SpongeBob, Kids Next Door, Dexter's Lab, and the list goes on. The episode is also a great example of the thing I was talking about earlier. Jimmy makes a sick patch to get out of going to school, although there are certain nice things you get when you're sick that come with the caveat of being sick, so I understand Jimmy's plight. They also create the opposite of the US healthcare system. I think this is my favorite Miss Fowl scene.
I miss them all so much. Except Shane.
Alarmingly, the patches absorb into their skin, and Jimmy has to go inside Carl to get his own disease to make a vaccine? Showing this propaganda to children? For shame, Nickelodeon.
Germ attack!
I saw that movie. The special effects were third rate, but the acting was better than I expected. I gave it a thumbs up.
Shit, I am just Sheen. Also, all of the parents in Retroville have insane at-home cures.
No more leeches, Mama. No more leeches, Mama. No more leeches, Mama.
Oh, that's troubling. Hugh takes the boys deep into the woods for a campout in a Boy Scout-style Acorn Lads outfit. But it doesn't seem like this is an Acorn Lads sanctioned event, as it's only 3 boys and 1 adult, which is actually a pretty alarming ratio. And Jimmy makes the wilderness nicer than his actual house. As much as I've praised the animation, I'll admit this episode has some ugly animals. And this strange reveal.
Good thing I implanted a homing chip under your father's skin, or I never would have been able to find you.
Oh yeah, that darn thing still itches me.
Hey, remember when I said every episode except the pilot was on Paramount Plus? Turns out I lied. Episode 13, Party at Neutron/Ultra Sheen, also isn't on the service, which is insane because this is a great episode. Moral of the story? Buy the DVD, not Paramount Plus. Jimmy's parents are going to see a fake play called Ducks, which sounds like it should be a Cats parody, but the song is from West Side Story.
When you're a duck all the way, from the first time you quack to the last egg you lay.
And Sheen comes over with a DVD of some terrible Ultralord spinoff. Haha, I agree, Sheen. Pointless spinoffs can be obnoxious. Sheen and Carl convince Jimmy to throw a party, pointing out that they might get Nick or even Betty Quinlan to show up.
Betty Quinlan?
Oh, god damn it. I thought she didn't show up till the 2nd season. Okay. Betty Quinlan is the worst. If there's one thing I like about Jimmy Neutron, it's the characters. They all have their perfect little roles to play in making the story what it is. Except Betty Quinlan.
Betty Quinlan is a generic romantic interest girl. The prettiest girl in school, so to speak. Think Trixie from Fairly Odd Parents. Except Trixie works because she gets introduced pretty early, and Timmy otherwise has no love interest. Plus, Timmy's pretty explicitly a superficial person, so him going after the hot chick in school makes sense. Jimmy, on the other hand, already has a blatantly obvious love interest and is clearly set up as more of an intellectual than Timmy. Also, he's a 10-year-old boy. Most of the time it seems like he doesn't even like girls. She doesn't work outside of maybe 1 episode. If she pulled a Terry and we never saw her again, which seems like the original intent since we don't see her until the middle of the next season, maybe this could pass, but her continued existence contradicts so much of what we know, and it just never feels right. Put a pin in her, we'll come back to her. Sheen shows off Jimmy's inventions, which it's impossible they didn't already know about that because Jimmy's such a fucking show-off. She wants to dance like Uma Thurman, bury me till I confess. Also, who invited Butch the Bully? Bullies have no friends. So apart from the glaring stain that is introducing Betty Quinlan to the series, this is a pretty good episode. Then we get Ultra Sheen, where Sheen gets transported into an Ultra Lord video game. And let me tell you, any Ultra Lord-centric episode is guaranteed to rule. I guess I haven't explained who Ultra Lord is yet. Ultra Lord is this superhero that Sheen has this obsession with. Like, to an almost religious extent?
I'd like to be paired with my Ultra Lord collection.
Which does raise questions about the name Ultra Lord. Hey, I got an Ultra Lord I could tell you about. This does have a trope I kinda hate where characters end up in a video game and then they defeat the boss in a way that probably wouldn't work in a real game. But I'm not too concerned about that. This episode is great. Sheen wins by knowing obscure Ultra Lord lore.
Yes, the European director's cut of Ultra Lord episode 317 reveals that his arch enemy RoboFiend is lactose intolerant. Taste llama milk, Star Destroyer.
No! I'm allergic!
And Ultra Lord is voiced by Jim Cummings.
Greetings, life form. I'm about to engage RoboFiend in pitched combat. Would you like to be my battle buddy?
In the next episode, Jimmy gets a TV show.
Nah, Jimmy Neutron wouldn't work on TV. Not unless it was like a dance show or something.
Hey everybody, it's time to get down with America's favorite educational program, Funky Jam Dance Party!
Okay, I'm listening.
I'll be your test tube baby at the Funky Jam Dance Party.
Okay, I take it back. This could work.
Actually, no, it's very clear the voices the actresses have given these characters aren't really suited for singing high-pitched dance music. That's fine, though. The scene still works in context. Although this love child between Britney Spears and Crazy Frog has always bothered me, I'm glad she was only ever a background character with zero elaboration. Although I think her name is Britney. I do love the dark plotline Sheen has given his puppet show.
Dad, you've been bitten. You're turning into a giant worm. Run, run, son. Run while you can. I love you, Dad.
I thought Jimmy was the one I related to, but in retrospect, Sheen is exactly how I acted at that age. He's puppetastic. And oh boy, this next one is a big one. It's the introduction of Professor Finbar Calamitous.
So, I'm pretty sure Professor Calamitous is the most recurring villain on the show. I haven't gone back and double-checked that, but my memory is that he stands out as the biggest villain of the series. And it makes perfect sense why. He's evil Jimmy. He's all of Jimmy's worst traits exaggerated. He is Jimmy's Wario.
Jimmy's a lazy genius. Professor Calamitous can never finish anything. He flunked out of Miss Foul's class and was never seen again, so I'm not sure how he received a doctorate. Oh, and he's voiced by Tim Curry.
You see, these walls are made of pure chromium steel with just a hint of magenta in the piping to really bring out the... Oh, never mind.
Much like how I think the show's pilot is a good introduction to the show while not being its best episode, I think this is a great introduction to a villain that has better episodes. At least I remember better episodes with him. We'll see if that holds up.
I see you shiver with anticipation.
Hey, remember the episode where Jimmy was bad at athletics and then made technology to make him better at athletics? Well, what if we did that episode again, but this time it was parent-student games, and Jimmy's dad was the one who was unathletic. It's season 1 and you're already repeating stories. And how come we never see this overly aggressive gym coach in action again?
Ready, set. I did not say go. I said set. Ready, set. Not go. Not go. Go!
Wait a minute, is that Jim Belushi? Well, fuck, I think this is the funniest he's ever been. So naturally, Cindy destroys the special headband Jimmy made his dad before the big finale, and her mom is, well, frankly, really rude in general, but especially for someone who's down 2-0.
Smell that, Cindy. That's the stench of loserdom.
Except the last event is 90% of your score for some reason. What is this, a college exam? But even without the headband, Hugh does pretty well up until he hits a lemonade stand, which I can't even blame him for. They put that right in the middle of the course for blindfolded wagon race. Someone was bound to run into it. I do like the ending where Cindy's mother turns out to be her aunt.
Yes, it's me, Olympic champion and Buff Chick magazine foldout, Susie Vortex.
God, how do I get a subscription to Buff Chick magazine? Also here, I want to compliment voice actor Rob Paulson, well known as one of the greats in the industry, who plays Carl and his father with two distinct voices that feel like they're relatives but very different ages.
You hear that, son? We won! And not a single injury.
Ow, my foot!
This is great work. Up next, it's The Pizza is Aggressive. I don't even know if people will get that reference. There was a funny internet meme called the Jimmy Neutron Happy Family Hour that's kind of based on this episode, because this has a scary pizza and that has a scary pizza. Anyways, Jimmy throws the ultimate sleepover with pillow fights, pizza, and scary stories. Although a surprising lack of video games despite his ability to produce them in the wilderness. Also, this story is not scary at all.
Once there was a monster who only appeared at night, at sleepovers. And he was called the Sleepover Monster. He only came out at night because the sun was his mortal enemy. And he liked to eat children.
This is the thing you say to the tiniest 3-year-old to scare them, not cool preteens like Jimmy and his pals. But then, of course, Carl pushes all the buttons and gets an aggressive pizza. You guys ever seen House 4?
Don't forget to eat your favorite pizza, man.
I won't spoil the ending, but it's the type of off-the-wall ending that really made me love Jimmy Neutron. So, a pretty weak episode stitched to a pretty strong episode. Honestly, I think it's one of the show's best. And you know what makes Maximum Hugh even weaker as an episode? The next episode is about Jimmy being embarrassed by his dad at a school function, but this time it's not athletic, so it doesn't just feel like a rehash of an earlier episode. And this one was so good, they made it a full 22-minute episode instead of having two 11-minute segments.
That's something I always liked about Jimmy Neutron. It was willing to use either format. If the episode only required 11 minutes, it'd just be an 11-minute episode, but if they needed all 22, they'd take all 22. This is unlike something like SpongeBob, where every episode was two 11-minute segments, and the double-length 22-minute episodes were usually, like, big event episodes. Jimmy would just do that for any episode.
In fact, after this episode, 22 minutes becomes the norm, with only occasional segmented episodes. This is also the first, and if memory serves, only episode where Cindy and Libby's respective dads return from the movie, because it's the Father's Day Follies, and Jimmy's dad is embarrassing. So what does he do but make his dad cool? And goddamn, Retroville is pretty fucking retro. The cool kid in school is James Dean, so naturally when Jimmy's dad is cool, he's basically Elvis. They even bring back his Hubie Doobie nickname from the 70s, which honestly makes even less sense when talking about how retro the town is. This town is stuck in the 50s, how did they make it to the 70s? Weirdly, the animation seems off in this episode. Like, look at Hugh's feet. And what the fuck are they eating in this scene? Anyways, Jimmy wants his dad back and he uses paternal instinct to do it. Honestly, this one could have been 11 minutes. But this next one could not have. First things first, Cindy has a blow-up doll of Jimmy. Concerning. Second, I also remember this one being from later in the series, and there's two reasons why. One, these alien characters would become somewhat more recurring in later episodes. Two, Libby's hair is different.
So, let me tell you about the Libby's hair debacle. So, in the movie, and all of the episodes so far, Libby has looked like this. But in this episode, A Beautiful Mind, and the next episode, Sorry Wrong Era, she looks like this. before going back to looking like this for the rest of Season 1. And then, in the Season 2 premiere, they explained how she went from this look to this look. So, what I figure must have happened is they were working on Season 2 while Season 1 was still coming out, and these 2 episodes were singled out as particularly good and moved up to Season 1. A, to generate hype for the upcoming Season 2, and B, not to distract from some of the event episodes from Season 2. And they just kind of figured we wouldn't notice Libby looked different, but I definitely did, and honestly, I thought it was weird they even bothered to explain her change in appearance. I thought it was just fine for her to suddenly look different.
An asteroid full of asterubies lands in Cindy's lawn, and Jimmy says the mother lode is on a bigger asteroid, so he takes them all up there to mine. It's treasure of the Sierra Madre for children. That is a compliment.
Libby, I don't think they need no stinking badges.
Also, Jimmy has a holographic camp counselor named Chip, except that is not Chip. That is Skeet, the big McThankies from McSpankies guy. Now, hear me out. Jimmy saw Skeet at McSpankies and based his hologram on him. It makes sense. And yes, they do explain how they breathe in space in a different episode. We'll get there. I will admit these aliens are kinda ugly, and even in a generic way, everything looked this bad back then. I'm sorry I already made the Crazy Frog joke. Maurice LaMarche plays Zia, a great voice talent, love him. But the 2 goons are named Barbarino and T. Barbarino's based on John Travolta's character on Welcome Back, Kotter, which is weird enough that it kinda works. But T is just based on Mr. T, and it is very awkward. And unlike Calamitous, this probably is their best episode, but that's nothing to sneeze at. This is one of the better episodes. Next up, in Sorry Wrong Era, Jimmy subjects Libby and Cindy to the existential horror of smoothies coming out of their nose for all time. Over and over and over.
Is it still there? Fuck, I looked!
Jimmy's dad sends them back to the Cretaceous era, and when they get there, Jimmy makes a big deal about not messing around with anything that may disrupt the timeline, but then he sets a volcano to go off many years too early, which I feel would be way more catastrophic to the timeline than any little thing Carl and Sheen might do. It's not even necessary at that point. He could have just sent them home. But the timeline seems to be mostly fine. Except now Hugh's allowed to jump out of an airplane with no parachute on into the middle of downtown? There's a lot of great stuff in this episode. It's got one of my favorite Sheen and Carl interactions, plus Carl's Calypso song and Sheen's adventures with the pterodactyl are pretty cool. Plus you got Jimmy's dad doing all these time shenanigans. But I'm foregoing showing you any of that so I can show you this ending.
Oh no! We did alter the timeline! We created a world where human males are slaves to a race of female warriors!
They expected us to ask, why can Jimmy breathe in space? But ever since I've seen this, the only question I have is, why does Jimmy's mom have a cage for his dad?
And that's the final episode of Season 1, but you may have noticed I skipped 2, and there's a reason for that. This 2-part episode is a follow-up to the movie.
But I haven't talked about the movie yet, so let's tell this story from the beginning.
It's hard to say when the story of Jimmy Neutron starts. Creator John A. Davis created the idea for Runaway Rocket Boy in college, but shelved it for being too ambitious. However, in the 90s, Davis would become one of the earliest people to dip into computer animation. He made a proof-of-concept clip starring a character named Johnny Quasar and his robot dog Goddard. The clip was eventually seen by Steve Odekirk, the director of Ace Ventura 2 and all those Thumb movies, though now he's probably best known for Kung Pao Enter the Fist. He loved the idea and began helping John develop a pitch for Nickelodeon. Together they made Runaway Rocket Boy, a 15-minute proof of concept. There's a lot of rough edges that needed to be sanded off before the show, but it equally shows promise. This short would be an inspiration for the movie, and there's jokes in this that land better than they do in the movie. Like this?
How many times have we told you not to launch yourself off the roof?
Doesn't work as well because he crashed into the roof, not launched off of it. But in this version...
How many times have we told you not to launch your friends off the roof?
Yeah, that's clearly what the joke was meant to be. At the same time, this version of Carl is not ready for prime time.
I don't know, Jimmy. I get car sick.
Nick loved the show enough to greenlight a season, plus a movie to help promote the show. That sounds insane now, but Nickelodeon was coming hot off the heels of some very lucrative Rugrats and Wild Thornberry movies, so a theatrical tie-in movie made sense back then. However, leading up to the movie, a series of shorts were produced and aired on Nickelodeon. These were pretty close to the end product, although the animation was clearly worse and the voices aren't quite right.
Oh, Gas Planet, it still doesn't work right.
Anything I can do to help, Jimmy?
Also, Goddard speaks.
Seems logical, Captain.
Weirdly enough, we will address this again, and I don't mean in the movie where Goddard's suggestions come with voiceover. These would even inspire things that happened later in the series, including the whole episode Sorry Wrong Era. These culminated in Calling All Aliens, which kinda led into the movie, except these still seem to be part of those not quite canon early segments, mostly because they called Mr. and Mrs. Vortex the Applebees. But the final segment ends right where the movie opens. This was actually my first exposure to Jimmy Neutron. I saw the movie in theaters, and it's what got me curious about the show. The film opens with Jimmy launching a satellite into space because he picked up a message but couldn't decipher it, and is now attempting to reach out to the aliens. Later that day, Jimmy and his friends want to go to a theme park opening on a school night, but when their parents won't let them, they sneak out. They declare how cool it is to not have parents and see a shooting star. But they better be careful what they wish for, because all the adults in town are abducted by aliens. The children initially celebrate, but quickly find they need their parents back. And it takes Jimmy entirely too long to figure out that there's something suspicious going on, eventually locating their parents on a different planet. And in a sequence as cool and imaginative as it is ridiculously impractical, they convert all the Retroland rides into rocket ships and blast them off into space. Of course, the aliens, who are all goo creatures in egg bodies, worship a giant chicken who they intend to feed the parents to. And it's up to Jimmy and his friends to take them down and save their parents. So, what do I think of it? I think it holds up about as well as it did on release. But honestly, I liked this movie as a kid, but I never loved it. I always preferred the show, and on a rewatch, I hold to that. This movie never reaches the highs of some of the show's best episodes, and there's also a bunch of little things the show does better. Cindy gets a redesign before the pilot, and she just looks better in the show. And weirdly, the animation looks better on the show. I think maybe it's the lighting, but something's just off about these characters in a way they aren't usually on the show. I don't know, they're too gooey, too bouncy. It doesn't look right. And this movie has way too many pop song montages, and like I said earlier, most of the music isn't good. It even feels a little tonally inconsistent. They've got this 50s aesthetic. Why are they playing so much modern pop? And, 70s punk? Okay, the Ramones kind of work, especially for a scene of kids with a no adult supervision. Although I have no idea how Blitzkrieg Bop became the go-to song for every single movie. I think something like Rock and Roll High School would have been better for this scene. Also, the recurring motif of the show is that Jimmy causes all of the problems he has to fix, and this movie tries to do that by having the Yokians blame him for sending them a message, but that's not his fault. They're the ones who reached out, and they're the ones sacrificing people. And, well, I brought up his role in the film, and I really just gotta talk about Nick. At the start of the movie, he seems to be the bad influence. He's the one who encourages Jimmy and his friends to sneak out. But later, he's the one who wants to lead the charge against the aliens, and the show goes on to continue showing him as a cool kid. There's no comeuppance for him being a bad influence, not even a moment where he has to admit he's wrong.
You heard it here, folks. Jimmy Neutron says sneaking out is cool.
That being said, much like the pilot, this movie is a good introduction to the show. It shows Jimmy's more rebellious side, deciding to sneak out and declaring that no parent is best, while also showing some comeuppance for his hubris. I also appreciate that it remained canon to the series, at least as canon as any other episode. It always bothered me how many shows just ignored the movie after it happened. It's also got a scope to it that feels appropriate for the feature film version of this show. It starts with Jimmy being chased by the military, and the alien abduction story is such a grand send-up of 50s and 60s sci-fi, like the show so often did. There's a lot of great humor, cool, fun, imaginative scenes, and a genuinely heartfelt moment between Jimmy and Cindy. There's even some weird-ass symbolism in the film. In an older film like Pinocchio, the theme park would have so blatantly been a place of sin and vice, but in Jimmy Neutron, they take those visuals and turn them into the coolest fucking roller coasters I've ever seen. Like, holy shit. What it lacks in presentation, I think it more than makes up for in story, and even then, the visuals were pretty decent for the time, keeping in mind they didn't have DreamWorks or Pixar money. Speaking of, this film would be one of the first 3 movies nominated for the Oscars' much-maligned Best Animated Feature category. It was up against Shrek and Monsters, Inc., which were miles ahead of it, but I don't think its position is unearned. It is upsetting they didn't nominate Richard Linklater's Waking Life, a beautiful movie that is much better than Jimmy Neutron, but I'm not even mad at Jimmy Neutron for that. They only nominated 3 movies. They could have nominated Waking Life and still left Jimmy in. Oh, but then who would they have edited into the audience? So yeah, I still like this movie. If you grew up with it, you'll probably enjoy a rewatch, although I must admit it probably won't appeal much to people who aren't already familiar with it. And that brings me to The Eggpire Strikes Back, a 2-parter follow-up to the film, which I'm pretty sure was supposed to be the season finale. My evidence for this is the Libby's hair thing from the actual final 2 episodes, combined with the fact that it's a 2-part follow-up to the movie. It even ends with Cindy mentioning several of the exploits they got into during season 1. Unfortunately, Patrick Stewart and Martin Short don't reprise their roles as the Yokian leaders King Goobot and his brother Ooblar, respectively, and you can tell...
What galaxy are you from?
Ooblar.
Where is your leader?
Ooblar, stop it. It's toast.
All that remains of the late, great Parental.
Yes, it seemed like just yesterday she abandoned us out of shame to be the chicken god of some other planet.
But honestly, these guys are doing something different enough that if you haven't just seen the movie, you kinda accept it. Like, yeah, sure, that was their voices. Plus, these are the original voices from Runaway Rocket Boy.
Bring the Earth creature to me, alive!
Okay.
I do appreciate that they still animated the lights coming from the bottom of their egg bodies. That's a nice touch.
And that concludes my report on the Pilgrims, America's first fashion victims.
This is what the liberals are teaching our children in public schools. And Jimmy once again proves to be a really stupid genius.
How do I get down?
Down?
Jimmy!
I'm not sure, Carl. I never thought about the landing.
Jimmy, who are you, Elon Musk? The Okians are back, and they bribe the citizens of Retroville with some really nice gifts. And honestly, both sides are really obnoxious here. The town gets way too fixated on the material gifts the Yokians give and not enough on them feeling sincerely sorry. But on the other hand, Jimmy just assumes they're still evil. And, like, they are, of course they are, but he doesn't know that. On the other hand, his principal bullies him.
Stop them before they're nice again!
That's a problem. Cindy goes deep undercover to find out Jimmy gets into his lab with a strand of hair at a DNA scanner. Not like he does that out in the open so anyone could see him do it. I think she's even seen him do it before. She's definitely been inside the lab. Jimmy keeps going, I gotta warn everybody about the Yokians, and then runs out and no one believes him. And then he finds new proof the Yokians are still evil, and he goes, I gotta warn everybody about the Yokians, runs out and no one believes him. Just over and over and over again. Of course, Pultra's back, and Jimmy defeats it because chickens can't burp.
She's drinking it!
Thank you, Jimmy, I can see that with my eyeballs. So to compare the two, the episode actually gave me more laughs. I think it's able to play around with the characters a little better, but story-wise the movie's got it, and probably rightfully so. This had to be an episode because of how easily the town turns on Jimmy. That'd be a problem for establishing a world, but it works as a joke on how dumb the town is once you get to know them.
And that concludes Season 1 of The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. It mostly holds up.
There's the odd Joker episode I think doesn't land. It certainly doesn't have that perfect batting average SpongeBob did in its first 3 seasons, but when it's good, it's really good. It's a show with a great premise, interesting characters, phenomenal voice talent, and admittedly hit or miss, but also ahead of its time animation. And I remember plenty of great episodes we haven't gotten to, so there's still lots to look forward to.
Now, I'm gonna admit, I initially envisioned this as one long video covering all of Jimmy Neutron, but I decided I wanted to get something out for the 20th anniversary, and ultimately, I think the series is gonna be better if I break it up into 4 distinct videos. Now, what that unfortunately means for anyone who wants more Jimmy Neutron content is it's gonna be a little while. Now, I did a commentary with my friends on the movie, but that'll maybe be out in November. Otherwise, don't expect any Jimmy Neutron stuff until at least December, probably January or February. But I promise I will do parts 2 through 4 all right in a row, so you will not have to wait for them. So, thank you for coming with me on this journey, and, until next time, I got a blast.
From here to the stars, or by the candy bar, rides a kid with a knack for invention. With a superpowered mind, a mechanical canine bark bar rescues the day from sure destruction. This is the theme song of Jimmy Neutron.